You know, so I think that, you know, people have to move beyond just imitating the rhetoric, and this is why I just hate black Twitter. You know, people imitate the rhetoric of what people say about them and then put blackface on it without understanding the actual theories that black scholars have written. You know, I don't have much patience for that.
And I also noticed that you tend to focus on something I had wrote down. I basically took a lot of your phrases and your statements and just tried to you know, just get a better understanding as I try to listen to when you're speaking or whatever.
Sure.
Just to try to get understanding. But it's interesting. You had made, I think it's really a consistent statement that looking at social media and just how, or even blogs, I guess, as well, I guess that would be considered somewhat social media, just that people are writing, but they're not researching. And you're having,
right.
It's a serious conflict where people are able to write whatever they want to write. You know, no background, no research done. They don't cite anything. They're able to write, you know, specifically, obviously, white women, white males, etc. But they're able to kind of write whatever they want to write about black people. But there's nothing there. But then it's somehow, it's accepted. It becomes a truth almost.
Oh, absolutely.
People, yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you know, one of the things that I've talked about is how I was, you know, trying to get a piece published. Wrote about the oppression of black men, and they sent me a blog to try to refute an academic work. And I looked, you know, so I you know, me, I went through the data set, broke it down, right? I was like, here's why you're wrong. You know, it's you know, I mean, look, people are making academic careers out of speaking to very narrow populations and crowds. Right. And when you're talking about people on social media, the people that are getting, you know, thousands and thousands of likes, the reason they're doing that is because they're being extravagant. They're saying the most provocative things based on a fixed ideology. So if you say that you're intersectional and you do intersectionality, you know, and you want to condemn black men because black men are hegemonic or toxic, you know, you just pick the poison and you're going to get like. But if you're an actual scholar that comes in and says, look, you're misconceptualizing the problem, that you don't understand the role of bidirectionality in our communities, you don't understand the role that economic poverty and low socioeconomic status and marginalization have on the stressors that actually cause or motivate intimate partner violence and homicide. That's not a popular conversation because nobody wants to think about what's the actual facts of the matter. Nobody actually wants to sit back and read 20, 30, 40 articles to try to get a grasp on what causes these problems. They want hashtag. Right. Yeah. And so it's a vastly different type of scholarship.
If we're going to be movements that criticize liberals, then sure, let's criticize liberals, but criticize all liberals. Don't criticize Bernie Sanders because you said that he focuses on class. And notice how reactionary this is. The argument wasn't that Bernie Sanders somehow has a worse record than Hillary Clinton. It's that Bernie Sanders says something like class, and because we've always had this issue in the black intellectual tradition where we say class doesn't talk about race, let's attack Bernie Sanders for that. Whereas people like Hillary Clinton, who literally told us 8 years ago that America was not ready for a black male president, that and really said weeks ago that black men in hoodies are scary, these people somehow... her whole platform has somehow avoided the whole issue of being attacked by Black Lives Matter. And now I've read that Black Lives Matter is supposed to actually become part of the Democratic platform. This is the co-optation, assimilation as force that liberalism has. And this is why I'm starting to fight there, because there's an assumption that if black people hold liberal values and proclaim this idea that we can change white people, that discussion and recognition works, and that, you know, we can integrate within their structures, that this is somehow a more evolved, you know, discussion and discourse than conservatism. The issue is that black people seem to be constantly asking for the recognition of white people. And in the case of feminism, it's become a moral trump card where you can problematize and pathologize radical and lower class black peoples and movements just because you say they don't include women the way you think they should be included. And that's one of the trump cards. So whereas you have working class black people from St. Louis, from Florida, from Baltimore saying we don't trust these kinds of politics. We don't trust these representational politics of Black Lives Matter. We don't believe that black nationalism is the dominant political ideology in our communities. You have people like, you know, Alicia Garza, et cetera, saying, well, no, we have to focus on intersectional, feminist, queer, trans identities as the leadership of the movement. Working class black people are like, we don't understand. You're not those groups are impacted, certainly, but they're not the ones that are being killed at the highest rates. They're not being incarcerated at the highest rates, right? So it's a moral trump card that says, well, because it's a feminist or intersectional type of critique, it gets a pass. You can't criticize it. You have to accept it, and if you don't accept it, we're going to call you Hotep Twitter. If you don't accept it, we're going to call you nationalist. If you don't accept it, we're going to call you sexist or transphobic or transmissile, whatever, again, I missed the hashtags, whatever word they use, right? And what that's done is it's flattened out all kind of criticisms that black people legitimately have of the movement. If you're going to lead a movement for all black people, the question becomes, do you represent the interests of black people? I want to know, if I'm supposed to support a movement, I want to know whether or not your ideology incorporates all my interests.
So basically what I think I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Black Lives Matter movement to you seems more of a movement of feminism and the rights of the homosexual community than it is the totality of black people.
Yeah, I mean, I think it focuses on certain identity politics. That doesn't mean that it necessarily has to exclude all the interests of other black people. That's certainly not its focus. For example, if there was a post that spoke about Janelle Monáe's song where she was saying "Say His Name," and there was a huge blow up on Twitter about how this is patriarchal, right? Because we need to emphasize, say her name, the Sandra Blands of the world, etc. And my reaction to something like that is like, now I'm confused, right? If the argument is that black men need to recognize that black women are killed as well, I have no problem with that criticism, right? But if the argument is that black men who are dying by hundreds, like we're talking about like 200 to 300 a year, versus black women who average between 10 to 20, maybe 30 on a given year of police brutality deaths, you're telling people who are the greatest victims of this type of violence that they have to displace themselves for your identity politic. I don't understand that logic. Let me give you an analogy. The analogy would be to say, we know that thousands of black men are victims of domestic abuse and intimate partner homicide in this country. We're talking about 30 to 40,000, right? But we know that black women are slightly higher, right? We're about a third, they're about two-thirds of that number. You're suggesting to us that if black men came out and said, we no longer need to focus on black female domestic abuse and intimate partner homicide because we're the minority within this victimization, we need to lead all the movements. You're suggesting, based on your paradigm, the world's going to say, you're absolutely right. Let's talk about these black men who are being abused and killed by women. That's not going to happen. So it boggles my mind that the way that they use morality and ideology is not based on any principle of leadership, but rather based on an identity politic that many people in the working class black community simply does not gel with. It doesn't parallel their experience. It certainly doesn't parallel the interests of poor black men, women, and children in our communities. So feminism gives them a pass. It gives them a moral pass.
Yeah.